Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Imperial as One's Belonging series, where we explore the experiences of individuals from the BAME community. And this week, I am really pleased to have with us Dr. Ifesinachi Okafor-Yarwood. Dr. Okafor-Yarwood is a lecturer in sustainable development at St Andrews University, the #1 university in the UK. And we are so happy that she is going to be spending her time with us this afternoon. So let's begin by asking Ify if she could give us a little bit of a description about what it is that has given her her sense of identity, her sense of belonging as she's been growing up.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me, and thank you so much for the question. I feel that the best way to answer that question is just to simply say my Igbo-ness. I am Igbo. I am Nigerian of Igbo descent. I was born and raised in Abia State in Aba, Southeast Nigeria. And I feel that, I don't know if I can use this term, but there's this sort of ruggedness that is always associated with people that are from Aba in terms of how, I could use the term resilient, in terms of how they stand up for themselves, how they take no prisoners in terms of, when something is wrong, they can tell you this is wrong. And when something is right, they will acknowledge the goodness in those things. And then also growing up, my mom especially instilled in us the need to not only stand up for ourselves, but also when we're doing good, for us to recognize that we're not doing bad, like we're doing well, to be able to self-praise, the whole idea of self-praising, acknowledging that you're doing good and not be shy of doing that. And so there's a common saying translated in English: if you do not blow your trumpet, nobody will blow it for you. And so these basically have kept me going as a child, and then coming to the UK to the moment that I am now. I mean, when someone praises me for doing a great job, I acknowledge it. But the fact actually is that I have already praised myself and recognized that I am doing amazing before you do that. So so that's basically, I think, in a nutshell, my Igbo-ness is something that have given me the sense of belonging. I can always proudly beat my chest and say, my name is Ife, I am Igbo, and I'm always proud of that.
I like that. I really do like that. I like that idea about giving yourself that self-praise and allowing yourself to have that self-praise. And that was what your mother instilled in you, to say that celebrate yourself, be who you are and celebrate who you are. Is that right?
Well, I would say my mom, but it's very common where I come from. Yes, I would say my mom, but it's very common where I come from, where I was raised. So even if it wasn't my mom, it could have been someone else. Like it could have been an auntie, it could have been a neighbor that sort of tells you the significance or the need. So I am absolutely sure that I'm not the only one that was raised like that, in terms of being someone that was born and raised in Abia State. So but this was something that still sticks with me, of the need. And I'm also trying to pass on to my children of the need to blow your trumpet, because sometimes people might not actually do that out of spite, not because they're not doing great. And so you should recognize when you're doing well and just acknowledge it as a person, and then move on and still carry on doing what you're doing. So yes, that's absolutely, my Igbo-ness is one. And then the way I was brought up, and that particular saying is something that's always given me a sense of belonging.
I like the way how you opened and unpacked that, to say it's more than just the sense of identity and belonging was community felt. and that's why you say you've got great pride in belonging to your Igbo-ness, because it's part of the culture. Yeah. So I really like, I really do like that. Can you give us an idea then, because your formative years were spent in Nigeria and developing, what things in Nigeria did help to lead you to kind of like the pathway which you've then taken in terms of your education, etc., and to where you are now? Are there any kind of key moments which helped you to think, actually, I want to be heard for this particular thing?
I think, again, the whole idea of the community spirit in terms of how we felt or how we talked about things openly, not only as a family, but as a community. I remember if, for example, it's something related to governance, and this is me as a young girl or as a teenager, I would be on the street, in the same street with other people like elders, maybe where they're selling drinks or selling something, and they'll be talking about governance and how the government is not doing well and how and why they must do something differently. I also remember walking with my auntie or my mom sometimes for protest, to protest against particular things, again, as a teenager. So these things were absolutely encouraged. And I don't want to say some of the things, some of the political protests that I've attended as a young girl, because of it's something that is also something that's very topical right now. And I don't want to get into the whole politics, but these were the formative years. And these were some of the things that I saw, that freedom of knowing that when something is wrong, you can speak up. And the only way to speak up or maybe be heard is by going to peaceful protests and demanding for change from the government. And then also, as someone that I am from the East, I am from one of the Niger Delta states. This is oil producing states. And if our listeners are familiar with the extent of degradation or oil pollution by multinational oil companies operating in the Niger Delta, then they would know why I've highlighted this issue. And so whilst I'm from a state that is an oil producing state, and whilst the extent of pollution might not be as bad, I've always watched or listened to people on the radio talk about how their farms have been destroyed, how they can no longer support their families, and how nobody's doing anything about it. They're not getting compensation from the government. So I lived in an oil producing state, Abia State, and then I am from another oil producing state, Imo State. And so these are things that you see growing up, and you see people organizing, people standing up against injustice, despite sometimes not, their protests might not necessarily yield a positive result, but at least they're doing something about it. They are not allowing themselves to be shut out. And so these were some of the things that I feel have made me the person that I am today, because maybe as a teenager, I was being observant, I was listening, I was watching, and now I can say that I've gotten to the point where those observation and then the things I've learned and the academic, I guess you could say my academic capabilities, such as my research skills, have then allowed me to get into some of these issues that I was seeing as a teenager, going in depth into it, and then be able to speak and write openly about them. So in a nutshell, I think I would say the freedom of protest, if there's anything like that my parents instilled in me as a young child, without necessarily saying, oh, you're a girl, you can't go. But basically, if you want to go with your brothers, you can go, so long as you're safe about it. And the church as well. I was brought up in church. We are Roman Catholics, and my for either going for mass, Bible studies, or going to block rosary. So those things I feel are some of the things that have actually made me the person I am today, and it's still shaping the person I would be in the future, and guiding the way I see things, the way I see the kind of change I can make as an individual, first, as a Nigerian, second, as an African, and then as an expert in a particular field.
Fantastic. No, that ability to express, that freedom to protest, that ability to actually allow yourself to observe, but also giving voice to the injustices that you've observed, and not being afraid to speak up. That in itself is something which I think a lot of people lack at this moment in time. So I can see from your early years, your formative years, that there was this element of freedom to protest, freedom to observe, freedom to express yourself. Okay, so when you came across to the UK, how was that transition for you? And what was it? Why was it that you came to the UK in the first place, as it were?
I came to the UK to further my studies.
Okay.
And so I recognize first, this is not your country, so you should mind your business. I mean, if this is the reality, you know, someone that's come from somewhere else to another place. So my goal was just do what you're here for. Keep your head down, do your studies, and don't just do anything. So of course, I have had this freedom in the way that I was brought up by my family, my community, and then coming to another culture. I wouldn't, of course, go on protest. You know, that's not the first thing I would do, because I felt, I would always feel, well, you're not here for that. You're here to study and then go back home. You're not here to get into trouble, because there's always an element of trouble or getting into trouble when it comes to protests, especially when you see police presence. Things could escalate and you might be arrested. So I never really, it was absolutely completely different in terms of how I saw myself arriving in the UK. I just saw myself as, oh, wow, this is amazing. This place that you've read about in books, you've watched on TV, on the news, and you're here now. So you just need to keep your head down, study, and do what you're here for.
Okay, so you came to study that cultural difference, so that freedom which you experienced in Nigeria, in your homeland, you couldn't express yourself in the same way that you had there in this new land which you are now inhabiting, as it were. I
didn't really want to. I didn't really want to, because I felt, well, I'm here to study, so I'll use the term, let me mind my business.
Right, okay.
If that's the thing, because I didn't want to get in trouble. I wasn't familiar with, you know, how things work, and I wouldn't want to, you know, then for my parents to receive a call and say, Ife, I've been arrested for protesting. So for a while, I never really did anything like that or joined any of the organized protests.
So effectively you were focused on what you came here for, which was to get your education. And was it the intention to go back? How was it? Was that the general plan? How was it to develop?
Yes, so initially the plan was to study, because when you get this expertise, you can go back home and get this amazing job. And so I had that intention, but then things changed. So the original idea or the original plan was to come and study and then go back to Nigeria and change the world or change my community. I haven't done that yet, but I'm hoping that I'm doing that from here somehow.
So expectations changed, or your expectations, because of life experiences, things have helped you to then say, okay, that's not the pathway. But what other things happened to you while you were here, which has helped to consolidate? Because I see from the stuff which you've done, as what your lectureship is that core of who you are or what you learned as a child, it's still there and you're still pursuing it. So what was it that changed or consolidated it here in the UK that led you to where you are now?
So when I came to the UK, I had come to study something else, like engineering, somewhere else. But I followed a friend that I met, to an open day at London Met. This was not the initial university that I came to study at. But then I went with her and I listened to this talk about international relations and peace and conflict studies. I was supposed to do something electronics engineering or IT related. but listening to this person speak, I was like, this is what I want to do, you know? And after that open day, I went about inquiring, how can I do international relations, you know, moving away from sciences to this. And then I found out that I needed to do preparatory diploma. So I decided to do a preparatory diploma in law. Upon completion, I went on to do international relations and peace and conflict studies. And this is where it gets interesting, because in my second year, because of the nature of the course that I studied, of course, a lot of the examples around conflict and conflict resolutions were drawn from Africa. Right. This is fine because the lecturers are the experts, of course. But what was not right for me as an African and someone that I felt the continent I've just left, I had a lot of examples of, but this is not it. But you know, like thinking, hang on a minute, this narrative is not exactly what is. I mean, it's not the real narrative. Yeah. Right. And so there's a contrast between, you know, how someone one from a region and an expert from a region, a nuanced way they would make an argument or they will present something in comparison to someone that just flown in and did something for a week and not necessarily engaged or collaborated with people from that region and then published something. Yeah. And so a lot of the literature that we were using around conflict issues in Africa were written by non-Africans. A lot of the ones you actually see as the important ones or the mandatory ones were written by non-Africans. And then when reading through these things and when you're using it to learn, you know that this is not exactly the reality. I mean, well, there are representatives that are accurate, but there are actually important factors, important themes that are missed out. Either the way that international organizations are presented as the heroes without whom certain conflict would not be resolved, and then relegating the role of national or regional agencies that actually play the key role in resolving some of this conflict, relegating it to the background. And then you're there reading and like, but this is not it. And I don't want to say that some of this narrative affected the grades that I got, because I wasn't a first-class student, of course, but I was also not a student that would engage the literatures that I've been used to teach. So a lot of the times I moved away from the literature that my lecturers would use and then engage my own literature. So sometimes, of course, this isn't good enough, because in grading, depending on who is grading, they might not like the fact that you've not engaged the literature that has been used in the class. When for me, the priority is engaging the literature that I felt relates or speak to the realities that I knew and the things that I believe should be reflected on or looked at. And so this was in my second year. I said to myself, I want to be this person standing in front of students talking about things. How do I do that? This was in my second year. And I'm thankful that this happened quite earlier, because it was then that I realized that you have more chances of doing better if you had a PhD. And of course, being a person of color, I don't have to sort of mince words to say, well, my opportunities of becoming a lecturer, for example, I have to do double work of my counterparts that are not from the minority group. And I was ready to do this work. But I'm thankful that I started asking or reflecting around these issues early enough to know the direction I needed to take. And I had a lot of lecturers at my undergrad university that are absolutely supportive, that, you know, I don't think I could actually have been here without that support, the mentorship that they gave. And so I completed my undergrad and I went on to do a master's in conflict, security and development at King's College London. And again, it was towards, I mean, maybe 2 weeks to writing my dissertation, I attended a conference at Chatham House on the 10th conference on illegal fishing. And there I was like, what is this? I mean, I thought as a Nigerian, as someone from oil producing state, the biggest problem to the maritime was marine pollution or oil pollution. And it was contributing a lot to, you know, degrading the environment and depleting fish stock. What is this about illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing? You know, but this was my first time of really hearing about the link or the connection and how big it is in West and Central Africa, for example. And it was at this point that I changed my mind about what I was going to write for my dissertation, because already I was going to write about EU about the UN and the AU, that is the United Nations and African Union policies around conflict resolution on the African continent. But after attending this conference, I said, I'm going to write on maritime security in West and Central Africa. And this particular, my dissertation shaped what happened next, because after the dissertation, I decided I wanted to do a PhD continuation of the research that I did, but focusing on looking at the link between maritime insecurity, primarily illegal fishing, as a human security threat, and how that transcends to then become a national and regional security threat. And it seemed to be the right decision because, well, I'm not doing bad.
No, you're not doing bad. I love that narrative. I love the way in which actually what you said was, or what I've heard, is that actually the narrative which was being presented to you, you wasn't accepting it as being quote unquote the truth, because of the experiences which you actually knew were happening at that moment in time. And then because of that, there was quite a few influential things which has helped you to say, well, actually, I believe that this is the important issues that we should be reflecting on and examining, because otherwise we're missing the point and we're glossing over. It's almost like putting a sticking plaster over the problem because we're not identifying the correct problem. Am I right in saying that is?
Well, yeah, you can put it that way, because I feel that even in today's world, you cannot solve the problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. You cannot talk about, certain issues and still present an idea or perspective that does not represent the realities from those regions. It doesn't have to be the person from that region talking about that reality, but at least test literature from those places, should also be introduced, so that at least your student can have a dual, if you can put it that way, a dual perspective, and then make up their mind, rather than the continuous presenting as one way of knowing or one reality that is different from maybe the realities that would have been painted from someone from that particular region. So if that translates to the summary you've just presented, then yes.
So you're much more inclusive. You're much more about having all of the voices on the table, as opposed to just somebody having their perspective without taking into account what's actually there.
Oh, absolutely. As a teacher, I think that's the best way, because then your student would be better informed and let them make up their minds with that knowledge, rather than, again, presenting only one perspective, and that perspective is not necessarily a perspective from the region you're talking about, or, because a lot of the issues we talk about around sustainable development would always almost involve regions that are not Western, for example. I mean, given that I'm in a Western country. And so it is therefore, it's almost like folly for us to talk about some of these issues by only presenting Western voices, without presenting voices from the regions that we might draw our case studies or our examples from. And then your students would then make the decision whether, okay, well, this speaks more to my reality. And if I'm specializing, this is why I might specialize in this way, or maybe want to look at things from this perspective.
Yeah, brilliant. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, you're now at the number one. I'm just blowing your trumpet, because earlier on you said other people may not blow your trumpet, so I'm going to blow your trumpet.
Absolutely.
Right? You are now at the number one UK institution as a lecturer. Tell me about that journey, and tell me, because it is belonging. Do you sense that you belong? If I'm allowed to ask that question of you.
Oh, yes, I absolutely. I mean, I belong, because, well, at the end of the day, well, I've already talked about the need to shine your light, right? Yeah. So I feel that I belong. I absolutely do. And I have been allowed, or no, I don't want to say I've been allowed, right? Because allowed would not be the right term. I'm able to do the work that I do without being, not spoon-fed, but without being restricted. You can't do this, because what we do as lecturers, as researchers, is to be able to do your work without necessarily being restricted or being told that there are certain things that is a no-go area, if I can use that term, due to maybe political implication it might have. So I would say that I am able to make good trouble from St. Andrews because of that research and the freedom that I have. And I have actually been able, to sort of continue to grow as a person. And, the things that I learned in my formative years, using it more powerfully as a researcher. I told you about how maybe as a younger girl, I would always go to these protests. I would always watch the elders. I would always observe, because I didn't feel like I had the tool, I had the expertise, or I had enough knowledge to be able to speak or sort of use my voice. But now I'm at a place where I feel that I no longer not only have the expertise or the voice, but I also have the research to back things up. So when I speak, I sort of roar, if I can use that term, right? You talk authoritatively because you have data to back it up. It is now up to the policymakers, the stakeholders you're engaging with, to sort of try and stop and reflect and look at that reality you're presenting. Perhaps there's another way of doing things. And so whilst I might not be on the lines, whilst I might not be on the streets protesting, asking for change, I am able to continue doing that on the streets of my, the articles that I write, the use of social media, my LinkedIn, my Twitter, to talk about things, and an engagement such as this one as well. Technology have provided enough opportunity for us to continue to do the good work, try to make positive change with our research, beyond just doing the research and writing the papers, but also engaging with the public on the need for a different way of doing things. So yes, I am able to make good troubles from the #1 university in the United Kingdom.
I'm seeing a TV show or something. Make good trouble from the #1 university in the UK.
Yeah.
Right. That's really an excellent position to be in. Did you ever envisage that I know you said that it was in your second year you had that aspiration to say, I want to be in front of the class, giving more factual, more informative, more information, which will enable the students to make informed choices and critically assess and analyze the information in front of them. Did you ever envisage that you would end up at somewhere like St. Andrews?
No, if I'm being honest, no, I didn't. Because automatically the first thing is Scotland is cold. So I wouldn't even think of applying for university in Scotland. Yeah, so I never thought of it. But then, you know what, by the time you finish, the reality is that upon finishing your PhD, the reality is you need a job, right? So you then start the process of applying to the jobs that sort of align with the things you've done. So on the first instance, I might not even think, oh, will I apply for a job in sustainable development? Because again, my training was around IR, peace and conflict, leadership, security. So I might not think, okay, maybe sustainable development. I might not think of it, if you had that choice, I might be thinking of something related directly to security in terms of the job title. Yeah. However, the reality is that you cannot even talk about sustainable development without talking about security. Yeah. This is the reality. And so in trying to talk about why and how I ended up here, I was looking for a job. I was looking for a job that is related to the themes or the things that I've studied. I applied to so many jobs. I didn't get it, but I was also fortunate. I was doing consultancy whilst I was looking for jobs. So at first I got a consultancy to do a research for an NGO that is based in the US, Stable Seas, the research on maritime security. And the project involved doing the first ever assessment that looked more holistically to maritime security and governance issues in West and Central Africa. There are 19 coastal states in West and Central Africa. And that was a big opportunity for me. And I did that. As part of that, as part of that project, I did like a 2 months consultancy for UNODC, that is United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the Global Maritime Crime Program. So to go to the field and collect the data that will enable us to do the final report writing for that particular project. And that sort of made me see the significance of research, right? One, doing the research, but then being also able to use the research to try and bring about change on the ground. So this consultancy work changed my narrative around being a researcher. You know, I don't want to be a researcher that does the research and publish for the sake of publishing, you know, high impact journals. No, because I feel that is absolutely, it's futile if you cannot then use the findings from your work to try and implement change. And this was why, or how that engagement with the consultancy sort of made me think about myself in that way. And so now, yes, it might be double work, but literally now I do a lot of public engagement. I try so I publish, and then I also write an op-ed that can be relatable, that can be easily read by the public and policy implementers, because they might not have time to read 10,000 words of peer-reviewed paper. You have to be able to break it down so that they would know in a way. I engage with the public on my LinkedIn a lot, and a lot over time as well on Twitter, because I feel we go to the field, we do this work, we engage with communities, and then you say, okay, thank you so much for sharing your ideas with me. I hope things get better. I mean, that is absolutely unfair, because next year someone else will come back and do the same work and say, I hope things get better. So how can we actually try our bit to be part of that, you know, the discussion process around making that change? And that's what I'm trying to do. And I don't think that if I had not been exposed to that consultancy work, I would have been a more proactive researcher, if you can put it that way. I mean, now, not all of us would have that opportunity. But then again, I would say, thank God for social media. You can start making a change from where you are. And that's a lot of the things that I'm trying to do as well.
Your story is fascinating. It really is, because listening to you, you're about impact and change. You're about you're not a conventional academic in terms of, I do the research, I publish. You want to see a real difference happen within the field which you're working on. You want to see the lives changed of those individuals who have been affected by events which have left them in the situations that they're in. And I think that's to be applauded. It really is, because it will ultimately, I believe, that's what's going to help millions of people to have a better quality of life, and for all of us to be able to recognize that life is a better one.
Yeah, and so I think I didn't actually finish, you know, bringing the story how I got to St. Andrews.
Yeah.
So whilst I was still doing that, I then applied for a job at St. Andrews, and absolutely forgot whether it was full-time or 1 year or was a cover. And so I was invited for an interview for this job. This was in July 2019, and I attended the interview and I was offered the job. But it was when I got the invite for the interview that I realized, okay, this was a 1 year position, like cover. But I had already started the consultancy that I was doing. I was like, okay, 1 year consultancy, an opportunity to work for the UN, go to the field, collect data, do amazing things. I was like, okay, I hope this doesn't appear arrogant, but I'm going to turn down the offer. And I cried the day I sent the email to say, I'm sorry, but this. I cried a lot because I felt, oh gosh, I've missed this chance. But in the end, whilst I was in the field, they advertised 3 positions, permanent positions.
Yeah.
I knew that the other role was going to be completed early 2020. But at the same time, I had already been offered a permanent position with the US company to move to the US.
Yeah.
But then the St. Andrews one happened, and it was a case of, okay, do I apply? I said, okay, well, let me apply. And I got it. For the US one, it meant it was now more practical for me to do the St. Andrews than the US because of family reasons, like my husband and my kids and all that. I don't want to say too much.
That's fine. That's fine.
I made that decision, but in the end, it was the right one because now my students don't only get a chance to hear me talk about things, but they also get a chance to listen to the real realities from the field. And this is based on those opportunities that the consultancy that I've done have provided, and the work that I'm still doing, because I'm still a consultant for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and only recently, actually about 2 weeks ago, came back from a 6 weeks field work to 5 West African countries, looking at a gendered nature of maritime criminality response and capacities for West African countries. And so the student gets to experience these things, you know, based on, and I feel that it was the right decision. But at the time, of course, I was so scared, but I guess this is my way of saying sometimes we should trust our convictions, we should trust our journey and maintain our focus when we're in our lanes. No matter what, you know, the noises and the voices we're hearing in the background, we should always keep our focus.
You know what, I'm thankful that you completed that story, right? Because it also shows, earlier on you spoke about having that freedom to protest, right? But it's also that freedom to be able to say, actually, this isn't right for me right now. That sense of who you are. Because for some people, they would have just taken that job. But actually, the fact, I can guarantee that your students are having a much better experience because you are truly an expert in your field. You're actually in the field, so they're getting first-hand experience, or not quite first-hand experience, but they are getting a much more immersive experience of what you're talking about, because it's a part of your lived reality. So that's absolutely brilliant. I'm just wondering if there are any questions which the audience would like to ask. I have a few more, but if there's anyone, if they want to either put it in the chat or if they want to raise their hand, then that would be fine. Just coming back to the whole, you talked about being up in Scotland and it being cold, so it wasn't necessarily your first choice. But now that you said that you feel that you belong, is that, do you feel that you belong to, which part of it do you feel you belong to, if I can ask that question?
I feel that I belong in the institution that I work in. I feel that I am an equal partner. I feel that my voice is heard or can be heard when I talk. I feel that I can actually make genuine contribution in my field from here, and that is, I feel also a sense of community where I live. I live in Creole, and the people that I live with are absolutely amazing, and that's the sense of I guess, if you put it that way, the belonging, the way that I feel that I belong. That's
excellent. I'm going to ask a kind of like a final question, and this is just in relation to, what advice would you have given to your younger self when considering kind of like how your career trajectory has gone? What thing do you think would have helped you? I'm not necessarily say accelerate to where you are now, but what advice would you have given to someone, say, at 16, 18, or when you were making that transition from Nigeria to the UK?
The advice I would give to myself, my younger self, if I knew what I know now, would be, it will be all right. You know, just maintain the pace, everything will be all right. And I say this because perhaps if I didn't go through some of the things I went through, I would not be where I am now. right? So
Mm-hmm.
I can't really say I want to change anything. So for
Right.
example, the fact that I was working as a carer when I was in my undergrad and
Mm-hmm.
still doing my underground might have been some of the things that made me more, very, I don't want to use the term hardworking, but really trusting my journey, because I know, or should I say, I knew at the time that the care work was temporal. I
Yeah.
wasn't going to be a carer for life. Well, I got a skill from it. I now have MVQ3 in health and social care. So tomorrow I could end up going to do training in nursing if I get tired from being a teacher, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the advice I'll give myself is to be patient. Everything will be all right. Because there were times when I felt, oh gosh, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. There were times when I didn't even feel, I mean, a lot of the times I'm meant to remember that I'm Black. Like you
Mm-hmm.
forget for a minute that you're a Black person, like, and then the environment or the people around you sort of make you remember all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example. When I'm asked, where are you from? I never
Mm-hmm.
say I'm British.
Mm-hmm.
In recent times, of course, I am British now by association because I'm married and my husband is British. But
Mm-hmm.
anytime I'm asked that question in the past and I say I'm British, or and then always the next question is, no, where are you from? I'll say I'm from England. No, where are you from? I see they're expecting me to say something else. And then the next thing is, no, where were you born? Where are your mother? Where are your parents from? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're expecting me to say something other than what I've said. And I say, oh yeah, Nigerian. I say, oh, okay, you're Nigerian. So they're now the ones telling me where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
And so to save myself that aggro, to save myself, and the person asking me, if you ask, where are you from? The first thing you hear is, I am African. And if you probe further which country, I would then say Nigerian, because that saves you having to embarrass yourself. And then that saves me my time and my peace of mind of having to go back and forth. No,
Mm-hmm.
I'm from England, I'm British. I say, well, maybe Black people are not supposed to be British, but
Mm-hmm.
this is my reality. So if we're looking at sense of belonging from that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually feel like I belong
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
Britain as a British,
Mm-hmm.
because the people have automatically sort of told me where I should belong. And that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. I'm a proud African. I am a proud Nigerian. And if that's the identity that you'd rather have me claim, then so be it.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, the community here in St. Andrews, the community where I live, and the colleague that I have absolutely have made me to feel like I am an equal partner in this project, whatever project it is. And the students are absolutely amazing,
Mm-hmm.
keen to learn, and they have to be. I mean, you're in the first university in the United Kingdom, so.
You know what? I think I'm going to leave it there. Speaking to a lecturer from the #1 university in the United Kingdom, making good trouble, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to close off with that and say another really big thank you for joining us this afternoon. It has been really interesting hearing about all of the many aspects that you've engaged with and will continue to engage with. That idea about the freedom to protest, that idea about giving individuals the voice, that idea of being intricate in empowering others, I think is a really solid message for all of us to hear. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to stay on, and if there's anyone who wants to ask questions with the recording stops, then please do that. I'm just going to also just let people know of what's happening next week. So let me just share my screen. Next week, we're going to have Emmanuel Natley, who is an international lawyer. Well, he's studying international law and human rights. He's a lecturer at the Open University. He's going to be our guest next week. So please come and join us again and hear Emmanuel's story. Very fascinating story as well. If you haven't seen any of the previous interviews, please go to our YouTube site and you can find it at tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO. I'd like to just say to everyone, have a good weekend, and I will see you again next week. And if you want to stay on to have a discussion, then please feel free to do that.